Picture this. A quiet transfer student walks into the most anticipated dance of the year, only to become the target of the school's most vicious bullies. They thought they knew exactly how this would end, with tears, humiliation, and another broken spirit. But what they didn't know was that behind those gentle eyes lay years of disciplined training, lightning-fast reflexes, and a warrior's heart that had been forged through loss and dedication. What happens next will redefine everything you think you know about judging people by their quiet exterior. This is a story about Maya Chun, and trust me, you've never seen a comeback quite like this one. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the pine-covered hills surrounding Cedar Valley like a soft gray blanket, and Riverside High School sat nestled in the heart of this picturesque Oregon town like a red brick fortress. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where Friday night football games were community events, and where the annual autumn harvest dance was treated with the reverence of a royal coronation. Maya Chun stood at her bedroom window on that crisp October morning, watching the school buses wind their way down the mountain roads, carrying students who had grown up together since kindergarten. She was still the outsider here, even after 3 months of trying to blend into the background. Maya's reflection in the window showed a petite 17-year-old with straight black hair that she kept pulled back in a simple ponytail, dark eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing, and the kind of understated presence that made people look right through her. She wore her usual uniform of dark jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and worn sneakers that had seen better days. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another quiet student trying to navigate the complex social ecosystem of high school. What they couldn't see was the controlled strength in her movements, the way she unconsciously maintained perfect balance, or how her eyes automatically assessed every room she entered, with the precision of someone trained to spot threats and opportunities. The Chun family had moved to Cedar Valley after Maya's father passed away 2 years earlier, seeking a fresh start away from the memories that haunted their old neighborhood in Portland. Her mother, Dr. Sarah Chun, had taken a position at the local medical clinic, while Maya had spent her summer setting up a training space in their garage, carefully arranging the heavy bag, speed bag, and floor mats that were among the few possessions she'd insisted on bringing from their old life. Every morning before school and every evening after homework, Maya would disappear into that garage, where she could still hear her father's voice guiding her through combinations, teaching her that true strength came not from the ability to hurt others, but from the discipline to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. David Chun had been more than just Maya's father. He had been her sensei, her mentor, and her hero. A former Marine who had discovered his calling as a martial arts instructor, he had begun teaching Maya the fundamentals of Krav Maga and kickboxing when she was 12, not because he wanted her to fight, but because he wanted her to never be helpless. The strongest people, he would say as they practiced in their old garage, are those who could destroy you but choose to protect you instead. His sudden death from a heart attack had shattered Maya's world, but it had also crystallized something inside her, a determination to honor his memory by becoming the kind of person he had tried to raise her to be. At Riverside High, Maya had managed to maintain her invisibility for the first quarter of the school year. She ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria, usually with a book propped open beside her sandwich, occasionally looking up to observe the intricate social dynamics playing out around her. She had learned to read people the way others read novels, picking up on the subtle cues of body language, the hierarchies established through seating arrangements, and the unspoken rules that governed teenage society. She knew that Brooklyn Martinez ruled the school with the kind of effortless authority that came from being beautiful, wealthy, and utterly convinced of her own superiority. Brooklyn was everything Maya wasn't, tall, blonde, and commanding, with the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet when she entered. As head cheerleader and daughter of the town's most successful real estate developer, she had grown up believing that the world existed for her entertainment. She surrounded herself with a carefully curated group of followers, chief among them Tessa Rodriguez, whose razor-sharp wit could cut down any perceived threat to their social order, and Riley Parks, who documented every moment of their lives. With the dedication of a court historian, turning their daily drama into social media gold, Maya had done everything possible to stay off their radar. She kept her head down in the hallways, never made eye contact that might be construed as challenging, and had perfected the art of moving through crowds like smoke, present but unnoticed. She had one friend, Zoe Williams, a vibrant artist with paint-stained fingers and a laugh that could brighten the darkest day. But even with Zoe, Maya kept certain parts of herself carefully hidden. How could she explain that she spent her evenings practicing combinations that could disable an opponent in seconds, or that she could read the intentions of everyone around her with an accuracy that sometimes frightened her? The trouble began on a Tuesday that started like any other. Maya was carrying her art supplies to the ceramics classroom, her arms full of brushes, paints, and the glazed bowl she had been working on for weeks. She was thinking about the upcoming autumn harvest dance, which had been the sole topic of conversation at Riverside High for the past month. The dance was scheduled for the following Saturday, and the entire school seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Posters covered every available surface, promising a night of magic under autumn stars, complete with a live band and a photo booth decorated with maple leaves and pumpkins. Maya had no plans to attend the dance. Dances were for people who belonged, for students who had grown up together and knew the intricate steps of teenage social interaction. She was content to spend that Saturday evening in her garage, working through the advanced combinations her father had begun teaching her before his death. Combinations she had learned by studying videos and practicing until her muscles remembered what her heart refused to forget. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. As Maya navigated the crowded hallway during the lunch rush, her mind focused on the delicate bowl in her arms. She failed to notice Brooklyn Martinez approaching from the opposite direction. Brooklyn was in full queen bee mode, gesturing dramatically. As she regaled her followers with some story about her weekend adventures, her designer handbag swinging carelessly from her arm. The collision was inevitable and spectacular. Maya's art supplies went flying in every direction, brushes scattering across the polished linoleum floor like fallen leaves. Her carefully crafted bowl, the product of weeks of patient work, hit the ground and shattered into a dozen pieces. But worse than her own losses was the sight of Brooklyn's pristine white designer jacket, now decorated with streaks of vibrant acrylic paint in shades of blue, green, and gold. The hallway fell silent with the abrupt completeness of a record being suddenly stopped. Students froze mid-conversation, sensing that they were about to witness something significant. Brooklyn stared down at her ruined jacket with the kind of horrified disbelief usually reserved for natural disasters, while Maya dropped to her knees, frantically trying to gather the pieces of her broken bowl and scattered supplies. "I'm so sorry," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible above the sudden hush. "I didn't see you coming. I'll pay for the jacket, I promise. I'll figure out how to clean it or replace it or whatever you need me to do." Brooklyn's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disgust, and finally settling into the kind of cold fury that made smart people step away. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had never been denied anything she wanted. "You clumsy little nobody," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "Do you have any idea how much this jacket costs?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Do you think your pathetic family could afford to replace something like this with whatever change you find in your couch cushions? Maya felt the familiar sensation of her training kicking in, the heightened awareness, the assessment of threats, the automatic cataloging of Brooklyn's stance and the positioning of her followers. She could see the micro-expressions on the faces around her, the mixture of fear and excitement that came with witnessing a social execution. But she also remembered her father's voice, reminding her that true strength meant choosing not to fight. Whenever possible. "I really am sorry," Maya said again, standing up slowly with the pieces of her bowl cradled in her hands. "Just tell me what I need to do to make this right." Brooklyn's eyes narrowed as she studied Maya with the intensity of a predator sizing up prey. Until this moment, Maya Chun had been completely beneath her notice, just another forgettable face in the crowd of students who existed to fill the background of Brooklyn's starring role. But now, looking at this quiet girl with her humble clothes and her genuine apology, Brooklyn saw something that offended her on a fundamental level. Someone who clearly didn't understand the natural order of things. "Make it right?" Brooklyn repeated, her voice taking on a mocking tone that made her followers snicker. "You think you can just apologize your way out of this? You think your little sorry means anything to me?" Tessa stepped forward, sensing an opportunity to demonstrate her loyalty to their leader. "Maybe she can borrow some money from her mom," she suggested with false sweetness. "Oh wait, doesn't your mom clean houses or something equally glamorous?" "She's a doctor," Maya said quietly, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The correction was a mistake, and Maya knew it the moment the words left her mouth. Brooklyn's expression shifted from mere anger to something much more dangerous, the look of someone who had been challenged and found the experience intolerable. "A doctor?" Brooklyn repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Right, and I suppose your dad is a rocket scientist? What is it with you people and your pathetic little fantasies?" Maya felt something cold settle in her chest, a familiar sensation that she had learned to recognize as the moment when her self-control began to fray around the edges. Her father had always warned her about this feeling, had taught her to recognize it as a signal to step back, to breathe, to remember that her training was a responsibility, not a weapon to be used carelessly. "My father is dead," she said simply, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her chest. For a moment, Brooklyn looked almost taken aback by the quiet finality in Maya's voice. But the moment passed quickly, and her expression hardened. "Again, well, that explains a lot," she said with a casualness that was more cruel than any scream could have been. "Maybe if he was still around, he could have taught you to watch where you're going." The hallway around them seemed to hold its breath. Several students shifted uncomfortably, sensing that Brooklyn had crossed a line that even she shouldn't have crossed. But Brooklyn was too deep in her performance to recognize the danger signs, the way Maya's hands had suddenly gone completely still, the subtle shift in her posture, the look in her eyes that suggested she was seeing something far beyond the high school hallway where they stood. Maya bent down and carefully placed the pieces of her broken bowl in her backpack. When she stood up, her movements were precise and controlled in a way that made the few students who were paying attention unconsciously take a step back. "You're right," Maya said, her voice so quiet that people had to strain to hear her. "He would have taught me to be more careful, but he also taught me other things. Things about respect and honor and what happens to people who mistake kindness for weakness." Brooklyn laughed, but the sound was slightly forced, as if she was trying to convince herself that she was still in control of the situation. "Is that supposed to be some kind of threat? Are you threatening me, scholarship girl?" Maya looked at Brooklyn for a long moment, and in that look was something that made the cheerleader's confident smirk falter slightly. It was the look of someone who was calculating distances, measuring reactions, and finding the other person wanting in ways that had nothing to do with money or social status. "No," Maya said finally, "I'm not threatening you. I'm just remembering something my father used to say about people who confuse cruelty with strength. He said they usually figure out the difference eventually, but by then, it's too late to change. The lesson they've taught everyone around them. With that, Maya turned and walked away, leaving Brooklyn standing in the hallway surrounded by her followers and the scattered remnants of art, supplies that no one seemed eager to clean up. As she disappeared around the corner, she could hear Brooklyn's voice rising in pitch, trying to reassert her dominance over a situation that had somehow slipped away from her. "Did you see that?" Brooklyn demanded of her audience. "Did everyone? See how that little freak just tried to threaten me? Well, she's about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong person. I promise you, by the time I'm done with her, she's going to wish she'd never set foot in this school." But Maya was already gone, walking toward her next class with the same quiet composure she had maintained throughout the confrontation. What Brooklyn and her followers couldn't see was the way Maya's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her backpack straps, or the way her jaw was clenched so tightly that her teeth ached. They couldn't see the way she was already planning her route to the garage that evening, or how she was looking forward to working out the anger and frustration on the heavy bag that had absorbed so many of her emotions over the past 2 years. What they also couldn't see was that Maya Chun had just made a decision. For 3 months, she had been content to remain invisible, to let the social hierarchy of Riverside High function around her without getting involved. But Brooklyn Martinez had made it personal when she brought Maya's father into their petty conflict, and that changed everything. As Maya took her seat in chemistry class and opened her textbook, her mind was already working through possibilities and contingencies. She had spent years learning to read people, to anticipate their moves, and to stay 3 steps ahead of any threat. Brooklyn thought she was dealing with just another quiet girl who could be bullied into submission. She had no idea that she had just declared war on someone who had been trained by one of the best fighters the Marine Corps had ever produced. Someone who could have ended their confrontation in the hallway in about 3 seconds if she had chosen to do so. But Maya had chosen differently, just as her father had taught her to do. She had chosen to walk away, to take the high road, to be the bigger person. The question now was whether Brooklyn would be smart enough to let sleeping dogs lie, or whether she would push things to a point where Maya would have to make a very different choice. As the teacher began explaining the properties of chemical bonds, Maya found herself thinking about a different kind of bond, the one between a father and daughter, between a teacher and student, between the person she had been before her father's death and the person she was becoming in his absence. She thought about the lessons he had taught her, not just about fighting, but about choosing when to fight and when to walk away. But she also thought about what he had told her about bullies, about people who used their power to hurt others, simply because they could. "Sometimes, Maya," he had said during one of their training sessions, "walking away isn't enough. Sometimes people need to be shown that their actions have consequences, that strength isn't just about what you can do to someone else, but about what you're willing to do to protect people who can't protect themselves." Maya had never thought of herself as someone who needed protection, but as she sat in that chemistry classroom, surrounded by the low hum of teenage conversation and the scratch of pencils on paper, she realized that Brooklyn Martinez had just made a mistake that was going to cost her more than she could possibly imagine. The quiet girl in the back row was done being invisible. The question was no longer whether Maya would fight back, but when and how completely Brooklyn's world was about to change. The next morning, Maya discovered what it meant to be on Brooklyn Martinez's radar. She arrived at school to find her locker decorated with sticky notes, each one bearing a carefully crafted insult written in different handwriting to make it seem like the entire school had turned against her overnight. The messages ranged from the predictable to the creative, but they all carried the same underlying message. Maya Chun was now marked territory, and everyone should know it. Maya peeled off each note methodically, crumpling them without reading most of them. She had expected this kind of retaliation, had actually been surprised that Brooklyn had waited until the next day to begin her campaign. What she hadn't expected Was the sophistication of it, or how quickly Brooklyn had managed to recruit allies in her crusade against the quiet transfer student who had dared to stand up to her? In first period English, Maya found her usual seat taken by a freshman who looked terrified but determined, clearly following orders from someone higher up the social food chain. When Maya moved to an empty desk in the back, she discovered that someone had carved the word "loser" into the wooden surface, the letters fresh enough that splinters of wood still clung to the grooves. Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, was too absorbed in her lesson on character motivation in classic literature to notice the pointed irony of the situation. During the break between classes, Maya encountered her first direct confrontation since the hallway incident. Tessa Rodriguez appeared beside her locker with the casual air of someone who just happened to be passing by. But Maya's trained awareness picked up on the calculated nature of the encounter immediately. Tessa's positioning blocked Maya's access to her locker while keeping her own escape route clear, and her body language suggested she was performing for an audience Maya couldn't see but knew was watching. "So, I heard you think you're some kind of tough girl now," Tessa said, her voice carrying just far enough to reach the interested ears in the vicinity. "Brooklyn told me about your little threat yesterday. That was pretty brave of you, standing up to someone who could make your life here really difficult." Maya continued organizing her books, not rising to the bait. She could feel the attention of other students like a physical weight, could sense the anticipation in the air as people waited to see how this would play out. Her father had taught her that most fights were won or lost before the first punch was thrown, that the real battle was always about psychology, about who could maintain their composure while making their opponent lose theirs. "I didn't threaten anyone," Maya said quietly, not looking up from her locker. "I just stated a fact about how bullies usually learn their lessons eventually." Tessa laughed, but the sound was harder than it needed to be. "Bullies? Is that what you think we are? We're just helping you understand how things work around here. See, when you mess with someone's property, there are consequences. When you disrespect someone who's been nothing but nice to you, there are consequences. And when you try to act like you're something special when you're clearly not, well, there are definitely consequences for that." Maya finally looked up, meeting Tessa's eyes with a steady gaze that made the other girl shift uncomfortably. "And what kind of consequences are those?" For a moment, Tessa seemed uncertain, as if she had expected Maya to cower or apologize or react in some way that would validate the script she was following. Maya's calm question disrupted the flow of the confrontation, leaving Tessa scrambling to regain control of the narrative. "You'll find out," Tessa said finally, but the words lacked the conviction she was clearly trying to project. "Brooklyn's got friends everywhere in this school. Teachers love her, students respect her, and even the administration thinks she walks on water. You're nobody here, Maya. You're just some sad little transfer student who doesn't understand that. There's a natural order to things." Maya closed her locker and shouldered her backpack, movements precise and controlled. When she spoke, her voice was so quiet that Tessa had to lean in to hear her, which made her realize she had moved into Maya's personal space in a way that suddenly felt less like dominance and more like vulnerability. "You know what I've learned about natural order?" Maya said. "It's usually established by people who think might makes right up until they meet someone who's actually mighty. Then the order changes pretty quickly." With that, Maya walked away, leaving Tessa standing by the lockers with a growing crowd of students who had witnessed an exchange that hadn't gone quite the way anyone had expected. Maya could hear whispers starting behind her, could feel the shift in energy that came when people realized they might have misjudged a situation entirely. But if Maya thought the morning's confrontations were the extent of Brooklyn's campaign, she was quickly proven wrong. In third period biology, she discovered that her lab partner had mysteriously requested a transfer to another section, leaving her to work alone on an assignment designed for pairs. The teacher, Mr. Henderson, seemed oblivious to the social dynamics at play and simply assigned Maya twice the work with a cheerful comment about how independent study would be good for her college applications. Lunch period brought a new level of sophistication to Brooklyn's harassment campaign. Maya entered the cafeteria to find every table in her usual section occupied by students who normally sat elsewhere, each group deep in animated conversations that stopped abruptly when she approached. It was a master class in social manipulation, turning Maya's invisibility from a choice into an enforced isolation. Maya bought her lunch and surveyed the crowded cafeteria, reading the room with the same analytical precision her father had taught her to apply to potential combat situations. She could see Brooklyn holding court at the center table, surrounded by her usual entourage and several new faces who seemed eager to be part of whatever drama was unfolding. Riley Parks was documenting everything with her phone, no doubt building content for the social media campaign that Maya was sure was already underway. Instead of retreating or showing any sign of distress, Maya did something that no one expected. She walked directly to the table adjacent to Brooklyn's group and sat down at the only empty chair, placing her lunch tray down with deliberate calm. The conversations around her faltered as students realized what was happening, and Maya could feel Brooklyn's attention snap to her like a laser. "Excuse me," came Brooklyn's voice, pitched loud enough to carry across multiple tables, "but I think you're confused about where you belong." Maya looked up from her sandwich and met Brooklyn's gaze across the small distance between their tables. "I'm sitting in the cafeteria eating lunch, same as everyone else." Brooklyn's face flushed slightly, and Maya could see that her direct approach had disrupted whatever scenario Brooklyn had planned for this encounter. The cheerleader had expected Maya to slink away to some corner, to accept her banishment with the appropriate amount of shame and submission. Maya's refusal to play her assigned role was clearly frustrating. "Some tables are reserved for people who actually matter at this school," Tessa chimed in, trying to support her leader. "Maybe you should find somewhere more appropriate for someone like you." Maya took a bite of her sandwich and chewed thoughtfully before responding. "Someone like me?" "You know exactly what I mean," Tessa said, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed to her theme. "Someone who doesn't have any friends, who doesn't contribute anything to this school, who just showed up here and immediately started causing problems for people who've earned their place." Maya nodded as if considering this seriously. "You mean someone whose father died serving his country, whose mother works 60-hour weeks saving lives at the local clinic, who maintains a 4.0 GPA while dealing with grief and starting over in a new place. Yeah, I can see how that would be threatening to someone whose biggest accomplishment is getting elected to hand out pom-poms at football games." The cafeteria around them had gone quieter now, with students at nearby tables abandoning any pretense of their own conversations to listen to this unexpected confrontation. Maya could see shock registering on several faces, both at her words and at the calm, matter-of-fact way she had delivered them. Brooklyn's composure cracked visibly. "You don't know anything about me or what I've accomplished. I've been accepted to 3 different colleges. I volunteer at the animal shelter, and I've organized more charity events than you could count. What have you done besides show up here and act like you're better than everyone else?" Maya finished her sandwich and began packing up her lunch, her movements unhurried despite the tension crackling around her. "I never said I was better than anyone. But I'm not worse than anyone either, no matter how hard you try to convince people otherwise. The thing is, Brooklyn, you're working really hard to tear me down, and I can't figure out why. What is it about me that scares you so much?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Maya could see it hit home by the way Brooklyn's jaw tightened and her hands clenched into fists. It was a psychological pressure point that Maya had identified instinctively, the same way her father had taught her to identify physical vulnerabilities in an opponent. "I'm not scared of you," Brooklyn said, but her voice had risen in pitch just enough to suggest otherwise. I just don't like people who don't know their place. Maya stood up, slinging her backpack over one shoulder with a fluid motion that spoke of countless hours of physical training. My place is wherever I choose to stand, Brooklyn. And right now, I choose to stand right here in your school, eating lunch in your cafeteria, taking up space in your world whether you like it or not. As Maya walked away, she could hear the explosion of whispered conversations that erupted in her wake. She had just done something that very few students at Riverside High had ever attempted. She had faced down Brooklyn Martinez in front of an audience and refused to back down. The social implications of that encounter would ripple through the school's ecosystem for days, and Maya knew that Brooklyn would feel compelled to escalate her campaign in response. But Maya also knew something that Brooklyn didn't. Every interaction they had was teaching Maya more about her opponent's psychology, revealing weaknesses and patterns that could be exploited when the time came. Brooklyn was used to winning through intimidation and social pressure, tactics that worked against teenagers who valued their reputation above everything else. But Maya had learned to measure success by different standards, and her father's death had given her a perspective on what really mattered that made high school drama seem almost trivial by comparison. That afternoon, Maya discovered the next phase of Brooklyn's campaign when she arrived at her locker to find it had been stuffed with garbage. Food scraps, used tissues, and crumpled papers had been shoved through the vents, creating a mess that would take significant time to clean up. A small crowd had gathered to watch her reaction, and Maya could see phones being held at strategic angles to capture whatever breakdown Brooklyn was hoping to provoke. Maya opened her locker and surveyed the damage with the same calm assessment she brought to everything else. She pulled a pair of rubber gloves from her backpack, along with a small trash bag, and began methodically cleaning out the mess. Her movements were efficient and unhurried, and she showed no sign of the anger or humiliation that the watching students clearly expected to see. "Seriously?" came a voice from the crowd. "Someone did this to your locker, and you're just going to clean it up like nothing happened?" Maya looked up to see Marcus Thompson, the basketball team's star player, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been respect. Marcus was one of the few students at Riverside High who existed outside Brooklyn's direct sphere of influence, popular enough to be untouchable, but decent enough to occasionally question the social order when it got too cruel. "What else would I do?" Maya asked, continuing to clean. "Leave it like this, and let whoever did it think they accomplished something meaningful." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice so the crowd couldn't hear. "You could report it. This is vandalism, and probably harassment too. The administration would have to do something about it." Maya finished cleaning and closed her locker, pulling off the rubber gloves and depositing them in the trash bag along with the mess someone had left for her. And then what? Brooklyn gets a slap on the wrist and becomes more careful about not getting caught next time. "The people who did this think they're teaching me a lesson about my place in the school hierarchy. Reporting it would just prove that I need adults to fight my battles for me." "So what's your plan?" Marcus asked. "Just take whatever they dish out and hope they get bored eventually?" Maya shouldered her backpack and looked at Marcus with the same steady gaze that had been unsettling people all day. "My plan is to let them keep escalating until they cross a line that even they can't uncross. Bullies always do eventually. They can't help themselves." As Maya walked away, Marcus found himself staring after her with the uncomfortable feeling that he had just been given a glimpse of something that most people never got to see. There was something about Maya Chun that didn't quite fit the profile of a typical transfer student, something in the way she moved and spoke and handled confrontation that suggested depths no one had bothered to explore. The final bell of the day brought Maya face to face with the most sophisticated element of Brooklyn's campaign yet. As she approached her car in the parking lot, she discovered that all 4 tires had been deflated, not slashed but simply emptied of air in a way that would be impossible to prove was vandalism. Her windshield was covered with sticky notes bearing phone numbers and crude propositions, clearly designed to make it look like she was advertising services she wasn't offering. Maya stood beside her car and surveyed the damage, aware that this, too, was being recorded by multiple phones from various angles. Brooklyn and her crew were nowhere to be seen, but Maya could feel their presence like a malevolent force, waiting to see how she would react to this latest escalation. Instead of showing frustration or calling for help, Maya did something that surprised everyone watching. She started laughing. Not the bitter, defeated laugh of someone who had been beaten down, but the genuine amusement of someone who had just seen something absurdly funny. She pulled out her phone and took several pictures of her car, including close-ups of the sticky notes and deflated tires. Then she called her mother. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the afternoon air. "I'm going to be late. Getting home. Someone deflated my tires at school, probably as some kind of prank, so I need to call for roadside assistance. No, I'm fine. Actually, I'm kind of impressed by how much effort they put into this. It shows real dedication to being petty." While she waited for help to arrive, Maya began carefully removing the sticky notes from her windshield, reading each one with the same analytical attention she gave to everything else. Several students had lingered in the parking lot to watch the aftermath of the prank, and Maya could see them whispering among themselves, clearly confused by her lack of distress. When the tow truck arrived, Maya chatted pleasantly with the driver while he reinflated her tires, asking about his work and his family with the kind of genuine interest that made him smile despite the circumstances. By the time she was ready to leave, the small crowd of observers had drifted away, disappointed by the lack of drama they had been expecting to witness. As Maya drove home through the winding mountain roads that led to her neighborhood, she reflected on the day's events. With the same strategic thinking her father had taught her to apply to any conflict, Brooklyn's campaign was escalating exactly as Maya had predicted it would, moving from verbal harassment to property damage in a pattern that suggested desperation rather than strength. But Maya also recognized that they were approaching a tipping point. Brooklyn's need to maintain her reputation as the unchallenged queen of Riverside High would eventually drive her to attempt something more dramatic, something that would cross the line from petty harassment into territory that Maya would not be able to ignore. And when that happened, Maya would have to make a choice about how much of her true self she was willing to reveal. That evening, as Maya changed into her workout clothes and prepared for her nightly training session, she found herself thinking about her father's lessons on the psychology of conflict. "Every bully has a breaking point," he had told her during one of their sessions. "A moment when their need to dominate becomes so desperate that they stop thinking strategically and start acting emotionally. That's when they become dangerous, but it's also when they become vulnerable." Maya wrapped her hands and began working through her combinations on the heavy bag, each strike precise and controlled. She could feel the day's frustrations flowing out through her fists and feet, could sense her father's presence in the rhythm of her movements and the sound of her breathing. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new escalations in Brooklyn's campaign, but Maya was ready for whatever came next. She had been trained by one of the best fighters the Marines had ever produced, and Brooklyn Martinez was about to learn that some people couldn't be broken by high school politics and social media campaigns. Some people had been forged by much hotter fires than anything a spoiled teenager could create, and when those people finally decided to fight back, the results were usually spectacular. As Maya finished her workout and began stretching, she thought about the autumn harvest dance that was now just 3 days away. She had a feeling that Brooklyn was planning something special for that night, something that would serve as the grand finale to her campaign of harassment. Maya found herself almost looking forward to it. After months of being invisible and weeks of being targeted, she was ready to show Riverside High exactly who Maya Chin really was. The question wasn't, whether she would fight back anymore. The question was whether Brooklyn Martinez was prepared for the kind of fight she was about to get. Part 3. The Hidden Depths. The next morning brought an unexpected development in Brooklyn's campaign against Maya. Instead of more direct harassment, Maya discovered that her opponent had shifted tactics toward something more insidious, systematic. Isolation through social manipulation. Students who had never paid attention to Maya before were now actively avoiding her. Conversations stopped when she approached, and even teachers seemed to treat her with a subtle coolness that suggested they had been influenced by whispers and carefully planted suggestions. Maya recognized the strategy immediately. It was psychological warfare at its most sophisticated, designed to make her feel completely alone in a hostile environment until she either broke down or transferred to another school. Brooklyn was essentially trying to make Maya disappear through collective shunning, turning her invisibility from a choice into a punishment. But Maya had grown up with a father who understood the mind games that enemies used to break their opponent's will to fight. David Chun had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, where psychological warfare was often more dangerous than bullets, and he had taught Maya to recognize manipulation tactics that most teenagers couldn't even imagine. What Brooklyn saw as innovative cruelty, Maya understood as a predictable escalation in a conflict that was following patterns as old as human nature itself. During first period chemistry, Maya found herself assigned to a lab group where her 3 partners made it clear through body language and selective deafness that she might as well not exist. When she offered suggestions for their experiment, they ignored her completely. When she asked questions about the procedure, they responded by talking to each other as if she hadn't spoken. It was a masterclass in exclusion, executed with the kind of precision that suggested careful coordination. Maya adapted by treating the situation as a solo project, methodically working through the experiment while her partners focused on making their disapproval obvious to anyone watching. What they didn't realize was that Maya's ability to work independently while under social pressure was actually giving her an advantage. While they were distracted by their performance of rejection, she was completing the assignment with a kind of focused efficiency that impressed Mr. Henderson enough to make notes in his gradebook. The pattern repeated itself throughout the morning. In English class, Maya's assigned discussion group somehow managed to have their entire conversation without acknowledging her presence, even when she raised her hand to contribute. In history, her usual seat remained empty beside her as students chose to crowd together rather than sit next to the pariah. By lunchtime, Maya was moving through the school like a ghost again, but this time it was an enforced invisibility rather than her own choice. Maya bought her lunch and surveyed the cafeteria, noting how conversations became more animated when she passed, how groups of students turned their backs to her with synchronized precision, how even the normally friendly lunch staff seemed to have developed a sudden case of selective blindness. Brooklyn had turned Maya's social exile into a school-wide performance, and every student was playing their assigned role with the dedication of method actors. Instead of retreating to eat alone in some corner, Maya did something that caught everyone off guard. She walked directly to the table where Zoe Williams sat with a group of art students who existed largely outside Brooklyn's direct sphere of influence, but who had nevertheless been recruited into the campaign against Maya. "Mind if I sit here?" Maya asked, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush that fell over nearby tables. Zoe looked up with obvious distress, her face flushed with embarrassment and conflict. Maya could see that her friend was caught between loyalty and social survival, between doing what she knew was right and doing what was safe. "Maya, Zoe began, but the words trailed off as she glanced around at the watching faces, at the phones that were undoubtedly recording this moment for later analysis and distribution. "It's okay," Maya said quietly, her voice gentle but carrying an undercurrent of something that made several students shift uncomfortably. "I understand. Survival is more important than friendship, right?" That's the lesson everyone's learning today. Maya didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked to an empty table near the windows, where she sat alone and began eating her lunch with the same calm composure she had maintained all week. But as she ate, she began speaking, not loudly enough to be disruptive, but clearly. Enough that nearby tables could hear every word. "You know what's interesting about mob mentality?" she said, as if having a casual conversation with an invisible companion. "It only works when everyone agrees to participate. The moment someone breaks ranks, the whole system falls apart. But it takes courage to be the first person to break ranks, and courage is pretty rare in places like this." The nearby tables had gone quiet, students straining to hear what Maya was saying and why she was saying it. Her voice was conversational, almost philosophical, but there was something hypnotic about her calm analysis of the situation unfolding around her. "The thing about being shunned," Maya continued, taking a bite of her sandwich, "is that it only works if you need the approval of the people shunning you. If you don't need their approval, if you know your own worth independent of their opinion, then all they're really doing is showing you who they are when they think there's no cost to being cruel." Maya could see Brooklyn watching from across the cafeteria, her face a mask of fury as she realized that her grand social experiment was not producing the results she had expected. Maya was supposed to be broken by now, reduced to tears or rage, or some other display of vulnerability that would validate Brooklyn's power over her. Instead, Maya was treating her isolation like a scientific phenomenon worthy of study, and her calm analysis was making the people participating in her shunning look petty and small. "My father used to tell me about soldiers who were captured and held in solitary confinement," Maya said, her voice taking on a distant quality that made it clear she was sharing something deeply personal. "He said the ones who survived were the ones who remembered that their captor's power over them was limited to their external circumstances. They couldn't touch what was inside, couldn't break the part of you that knows who you are and what you're worth." A few students had stopped pretending to eat and were listening openly now, drawn in despite themselves by the quiet intensity of Maya's words. She wasn't performing for them or trying to manipulate their emotions. She was simply sharing her truth with the same straightforward honesty that characterized everything else about her. "The soldiers who broke," Maya continued, "were the ones who forgot that their worth didn't depend on their captor's approval. They started believing that the cruel treatment they received was what they deserved, that their captor's opinion of them was more valid than their own knowledge of themselves." Maya finished her lunch and began packing up her trash, her movements deliberate and unhurried. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the suddenly quiet cafeteria. "I'm not a soldier, and this isn't a war, but the principle is the same. You can try to make me disappear through collective cruelty, but you can't make me believe that I deserve to disappear. You can refuse to see me, but you can't make me invisible to myself. And eventually, you're going to discover that a person who knows their own worth is the most dangerous kind of opponent you can face." Maya stood up and walked toward the exit, leaving behind a cafeteria full of students who were suddenly seeing their participation in Brooklyn's campaign from a very different perspective. Several of them looked ashamed, while others seemed confused, as if they weren't sure how they had ended up playing roles in a drama they didn't fully understand. Brooklyn was on her feet before Maya reached the door, her voice cutting across the quiet room with the authority of someone desperate to regain control of a situation that was slipping away from her. "That's a very touching speech," Brooklyn called out, her words dripping with sarcasm but edged with something that sounded almost like panic. "But you're still eating lunch alone, aren't you? You're still the girl nobody wants to sit with, nobody wants to talk to, nobody wants around. All your philosophical insights don't change the fact that you're completely alone here." Maya stopped and turned back to face Brooklyn, and when she smiled, it was with a serenity that made several students unconsciously lean back in their chairs. "You're absolutely right," Maya said. I am alone here. But the difference between U.S. Brooklyn is that I chose to be alone before this started, and I'm choosing to stay alone now. You, on the other hand, need all these people around you to validate your existence. Take away your audience, take away your followers, take away your reputation, and what's left? I know exactly who I am when nobody's watching, do you? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Maya could see it hit home by the way Brooklyn's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly around the edges. It was a direct hit to the psychological weak point that Maya had identified. In their previous encounters, the deep insecurity that drove Brooklyn's need to dominate and control. I don't need anyone, Brooklyn said, but her voice lacked conviction. I could walk away from all of this tomorrow and be perfectly fine. Maya nodded as if considering this seriously. Then why don't you? Why not just let me eat my lunch in peace and focus on your own life? What is it about my existence that requires so much of your attention and energy? Brooklyn opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find an answer that wouldn't reveal more about her motivations than she was comfortable sharing. The question had exposed the fundamental illogic of her campaign against Maya. If Maya was truly as insignificant as Brooklyn claimed, why was she worth so much effort to destroy? Maya didn't wait for an answer. She simply nodded once, as if Brooklyn's silence had confirmed something she already knew, and walked out of the cafeteria. Behind her, she left a room full of students who were beginning to question their roles in a conflict that was starting to look less like righteous social correction and more like something ugly and arbitrary. The afternoon brought new revelations about the depth of Brooklyn's campaign. Maya discovered that her guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had received anonymous reports about Maya's attitude and behavior, reports that painted her as a potential troublemaker who might be struggling with the transition to a new school. The concerns were subtle and carefully crafted, designed to plant seeds of doubt about Maya's character without making any specific accusations that could be challenged. Mrs. Patterson called Maya into her office during study hall. Her expression, a mixture of concern and wariness that suggested she had been thoroughly primed to expect problems. Maya, I want you to know that my door is always open if you're having difficulties adjusting to life at Riverside High. Mrs. Patterson began, her tone carefully professional but slightly distant. I understand that starting at a new school can be challenging, especially when you're dealing with personal losses and family stress. Maya sat quietly and listened as Mrs. Patterson outlined various support services and counseling options, all delivered with the kind of gentle condescension usually reserved for students who were considered at risk. It was clear that someone had painted a picture of Maya as a troubled teenager who was acting out because of her father's death and her family's financial struggles. I appreciate your concern, Maya said when Mrs. Patterson finished her presentation, but I'm curious about what specific behaviors have given you the impression that I'm struggling. My grades are excellent. I haven't missed any assignments, and I haven't been involved in any disciplinary incidents. Mrs. Patterson consulted the notes on her desk, her discomfort obvious. Well, there have been reports of some social difficulties, some conflicts with other students that suggest you might be having trouble finding your place here. What kind of conflicts? Maya asked, her voice genuinely curious rather than defensive. I understand there was an incident in the hallway last week. Something about damaged property and raised voices, Mrs. Patterson said carefully. And there have been observations about your interactions with classmates, suggestions that you might be isolating yourself in ways that could be concerning. Maya listened to this recounting of events that bore only a passing resemblance to reality, impressed despite herself by the sophistication of Brooklyn's character assassination. The reports had taken actual incidents and reframed them to make Maya appear unstable and antisocial, while positioning Brooklyn as a concerned student who was worried about a troubled peer. Mrs. Patterson, Maya said finally, have you considered the possibility that the students reporting these concerns might have their own motivations for wanting me to appear troubled? Have you looked into the context of these incidents, or spoken to any witnesses who might have different perspectives on what happened? Mrs. Patterson's expression grew more guarded. Maya, I understand that you might feel like you're being unfairly targeted, but that kind of paranoid thinking is exactly what I'm concerned about. When students start believing that their classmates are conspiring against them, it usually indicates that they need professional help processing their emotions. Maya realized that she was caught in a psychological trap that Brooklyn had constructed with remarkable cunning. Any attempt to defend herself or explain the real situation would be interpreted as evidence of the instability that Brooklyn had already suggested. Denying the conspiracy would be taken as proof that the conspiracy existed, at least in Maya's mind. Instead of falling into the trap, Maya did something that caught Mrs. Patterson completely off guard. She laughed, not bitterly or defensively, but with genuine amusement. "You know what?" Maya said, standing up and shouldering her backpack. "You're absolutely right. I probably do need to talk to someone about processing my emotions. Could you recommend a counselor who specializes in helping people deal with the psychological impact of systematic harassment and social manipulation? Someone who understands the difference between paranoia and pattern recognition." Maya left Mrs. Patterson's office before the counselor could respond, but not before she saw the moment of doubt that flickered across the woman's face. Mrs. Patterson was a trained professional who had spent years working with teenagers, and Maya's calm, articulate response didn't match the profile of an unstable student that had been painted for her. As Maya walked down the hallway toward her next class, she reflected on the escalating sophistication of Brooklyn's campaign. Her opponent was clearly more intelligent and more strategic than Maya had initially given her credit for. Brooklyn wasn't just a typical high school bully relying on crude intimidation tactics. She was a skilled manipulator who understood how to work within systems and use authority figures to achieve her goals. But Maya also recognized that Brooklyn's sophistication was also her weakness. The more elaborate her schemes became, the more moving parts they had, and the more opportunities they created for things to go wrong. Brooklyn was building a house of cards that looked impressive, but would collapse spectacularly if the right pressure were applied to the right spot. That evening, as Maya worked through her training routine in the garage, she found herself thinking about timing and patience. Her father had taught her that the most dangerous fighters weren't necessarily the fastest or the strongest, but the ones who could wait for the perfect moment to strike. They absorbed punishment, they endured provocation, they let their opponents exhaust themselves with futile attacks, and then they ended the fight with surgical precision when their opponent was most vulnerable. Brooklyn was exhausting herself with the effort required to maintain her campaign against Maya. She was expending social capital, calling in favors, and investing enormous amounts of time and energy in a conflict that was starting to make her look obsessed and unstable. Every day that Maya refused to break under the pressure was a day that Brooklyn's reputation as an unstoppable force was diminished. Maya finished her workout and began her cool-down stretches, thinking about the autumn harvest dance that was now just 2 days away. She had a growing certainty that Brooklyn was planning something spectacular for that night, something that would serve as the grand finale to her campaign of harassment. The dance would provide the perfect stage for public humiliation, with the entire school in attendance and plenty of opportunities for dramatic confrontation. Maya found herself looking forward to it. After weeks of defensive maneuvering and strategic patience, she was ready for the final confrontation that would determine the outcome of their conflict. Brooklyn had spent so much time and energy trying to destroy Maya that she had forgotten to protect herself, and Maya was about to teach her a lesson about the difference between cruelty and strength that she would never forget. The question wasn't whether Brooklyn would try something at the dance. The question was whether she was prepared for what would happen when Maya finally decided to fight back with everything she had learned from the best teacher she had ever known. Part 4. The Perfect Storm. The day before the autumn harvest dance, Maya discovered the true scope of Brooklyn's final gambit when Zoe Williams appeared at her locker with tears streaming down her face and a manila envelope clutched in her trembling hands. Maya's former friend looked around nervously before approaching, clearly terrified of being seen talking to the school's designated pariah, but driven by something stronger than her fear of social consequences. "Maya, I can't do this anymore," Zoe whispered, pressing the envelope into Maya's hands. "I never wanted to be part of this, but Brooklyn said if I didn't help her, she'd make sure I never got into art school. She has connections everywhere. And she threatened to destroy my portfolio recommendations." Maya opened the envelope and found herself looking at a collection of photographs, printed emails, and handwritten notes that revealed the breathtaking scope of Brooklyn's campaign against her. There were screenshots of group chats where Brooklyn coordinated her followers' harassment activities, detailed plans for the locker vandalism and tire deflation, and most disturbing of all, a comprehensive dossier on Maya's family that included personal information about her mother's work schedule, their financial situation, and even details about her father's military service and death. But the final page of the dossier made Maya's blood run cold. It was a detailed plan for the autumn harvest dance, complete with diagrams of the gymnasium layout, timing schedules, and a list of participants who had been assigned specific roles in what Brooklyn was calling Project Invisible. The plan was designed to publicly humiliate Maya in front of the entire school, but it went far beyond typical teenage cruelty into territory that could cause genuine psychological damage. According to the documents, Brooklyn had arranged for Maya to receive a fake invitation to the dance from a supposed secret admirer, complete with instructions to meet this person at a specific location in the gymnasium, where she would be led into a carefully orchestrated trap. The plan involved multiple phases of humiliation, starting with a spotlight moment where Maya would be called onto the dance floor under false pretenses, followed by a coordinated attack involving fake evidence of embarrassing behavior, and culminating in a social media blitz designed to permanently destroy her reputation, not just at Riverside High, but anywhere she might try to transfer. Maya studied the documents with the same methodical attention she brought to analyzing her father's old training manuals, noting the level of detail and coordination that had gone into planning her destruction. Brooklyn had recruited over 30 students to play various roles in the evening's entertainment, from the fake admirer who would lure Maya, to the gymnasium, to the social media team that would document and broadcast every moment of her humiliation. It was psychological warfare executed with military precision, and Maya felt a familiar mix of admiration and disgust for the strategic mind behind it. "She made me take photos of your house," Zoe continued, her voice breaking with shame. "She wanted to know your mother's schedule when you were home alone, what kind of car you drove. I kept telling myself it was just teenage drama, but this feels like stalking. This feels dangerous." Maya looked up from the documents to study her former friend's face, reading the genuine distress and guilt that Zoe was struggling to manage. "Why are you showing me this now? What changed?" Zoe wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing paint from her art class across her cheek. "Because I heard her talking to Tessa about what they're planning for tomorrow night, and it's not just about embarrassing you anymore. She's talking about making sure you never recover from this, about following you to whatever school you transfer to and making sure everyone there knows what happened here. She wants to destroy your entire future, Maya, and I can't be part of that." Maya carefully returned the documents to the envelope, her mind already working through the implications of what she had learned and beginning to formulate a response that would turn Brooklyn's elaborate trap into her own downfall. "Zoe, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you absolutely certain that Brooklyn doesn't know you've shown me these documents?" Zoe shook her head quickly. "I made copies during lunch when she sent me to get more recruiting materials." From her locker, She has no idea I've seen the full plan, and she definitely doesn't know I'm talking to you right now." Maya nodded, processing this information and recognizing the opportunity it presented. Brooklyn's plan depended on Maya being caught completely off guard by the evening's events, arriving at the dance with no knowledge of what awaited her and no preparation for the coordinated attack she would face. But now Maya had something that no military strategist ever wanted their enemy to possess: complete intelligence about the coming battle. "I need you to do something for me," Maya said, her voice taking on the kind of quiet authority that made Zoe straighten unconsciously. "I need you to go back to Brooklyn and act like nothing has changed. Participate in whatever final preparations she has planned. Follow her instructions exactly, and don't give her any reason to suspect that you've had second thoughts about this." Zoe's eyes widened with alarm. "You want me to help her destroy you, Maya? I came here to warn you so you could protect yourself. Maybe stay home tomorrow night or transfer schools before this gets any worse." Maya smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Zoe take an involuntary step backward. It wasn't cruel or threatening, but it carried the quiet confidence of someone who had just realized they held all the cards in a game their opponent thought they were winning. "I'm not going to run away, and I'm not going to hide," Maya said. "I'm going to that dance tomorrow night, and I'm going to let Brooklyn spring her trap exactly as she planned it. But what she doesn't know is that I'll be ready for her, and when she tries to destroy me in front of the entire school, she's going to discover that some people are much more dangerous than they appear." Zoe stared at Maya with growing confusion and concern. "What are you talking about? How can you possibly be ready for 30 people working together to humiliate you? This isn't a fair fight, Maya. This is an ambush." Maya's smile widened slightly, and for a moment Zoe caught a glimpse of something beneath her friend's quiet exterior that she had never seen before, something that suggested depths and capabilities that had been carefully hidden from view. "You're absolutely right," Maya sighed. "It's not a fair fight. Brooklyn has 30 people, social media, careful planning, and the element of surprise. But you know what she doesn't have? She doesn't have training. She doesn't have discipline. She doesn't have any idea what it means to face someone who's been prepared for real combat by someone who fought actual wars. Tomorrow night, Brooklyn Martinez is going to learn the difference between high school drama and actual conflict, and I guarantee you she's not going to like the lesson." That evening, Maya sat in her garage surrounded by the training equipment that had been her sanctuary for the past 2 years, carefully reading through Brooklyn's plans one more time and developing her own strategy for the confrontation that awaited her. Her father had always taught her that the best defense was often a devastating offense, that sometimes the only way to end a conflict was to escalate it so dramatically that your opponent lost all will to continue fighting. Maya had spent weeks absorbing Brooklyn's attacks, letting her opponent exhaust herself with elaborate schemes and psychological manipulation, while Maya gathered intelligence and waited for the perfect moment to strike back. Tomorrow night would be that moment, and Maya intended to make it so decisive that Brooklyn would never again mistake quiet restraint for weakness or vulnerability. She pulled out her phone and began making a series of calls, reaching out to contacts she had cultivated during her months in Cedar Valley, but had never needed to use before. Her mother's colleagues at the medical clinic, her father's former Marine buddies who had stayed in touch with the family, even some of the teachers at Riverside High who had noticed the subtle campaign being waged against Maya and disapproved of what they saw but hadn't known how to intervene. Maya's first call was to Sergeant Maria Santos, her father's closest friend from his unit and the woman who had taught Maya some of her most advanced fighting techniques during the family's visits to Portland. Sergeant Santos had retired from the Marines the previous year and was now working as a security consultant, but she had maintained her connections to the military community and her reputation as someone who didn't tolerate bullies in any form. "Maya, sweetheart, how are you holding up?" Sergeant Santos said when she answered the phone, her voice carrying the warmth and authority that Maya remembered from her childhood. "Your mom told me you were having some adjustment issues at the new school, but she didn't give me any details." Maya explained the situation in the precise, factual terms that Sergeant Santos had taught her to use when giving mission briefings, outlining Brooklyn's campaign against her and the elaborate trap that had been set for the following evening. She didn't ask for direct intervention or support, but simply requested advice on how to handle a complex tactical situation that required both physical and psychological responses. Sergeant Santos listened without interruption, asking only a few clarifying questions about the school's layout and the number of participants involved in Brooklyn's plan. When Maya finished her briefing, there was a long pause before the older woman spoke again. "Maya, your father would be incredibly proud of how you've handled this situation so far," Sergeant Santos said finally. "You've shown restraint when you could have escalated, intelligence when you could have reacted emotionally, and strategic thinking when you could have acted impulsively. But I want you to understand something very clearly. What you're describing isn't just teenage bullying anymore. This is harassment that crosses legal boundaries, and you have every right to involve law enforcement if you choose to do so." Maya had considered that option, but she also knew that involving adults would rob her of the opportunity to resolve the conflict on her own terms and send the message that needed to be sent to anyone else who might consider targeting her in the future. "I understand the legal options," Maya said, "but I think there's value in handling this myself, in a way that makes it clear I don't need protection from adults to deal with people like Brooklyn Martinez. What I need from you is tactical advice on how to turn her trap into her downfall without crossing any lines that I'll regret later." Sergeant Santos was quiet for a moment, and Maya could almost hear her thinking through the implications of what Maya was asking. Finally, she spoke with the tone of someone giving critical guidance to a younger soldier preparing for a dangerous mission. "The key to turning an ambush into a victory is superior preparation and the willingness to escalate beyond what your enemy expects or is prepared to handle," Sergeant Santos said. "Your opponent is planning psychological warfare using high school social dynamics. If you respond on that same level, you'll be fighting her fight using her rules. But if you elevate the conflict to a level where your training gives you an advantage, and her numbers become irrelevant, you can end this decisively." Maya listened carefully as Sergeant Santos outlined a strategy that would allow her to use Brooklyn's elaborate plan against her, turning the public nature of the confrontation from a weakness into a strength, and the large number of participants from an overwhelming force into a crowd of witnesses to Brooklyn's downfall. The plan was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its potential impact. Instead of trying to avoid or minimize the humiliation that Brooklyn had planned for her, Maya would allow it to begin exactly as scripted, letting Brooklyn commit fully to her attack before revealing capabilities that no one at Riverside High had ever seen or imagined. The psychological impact of Maya's transformation from victim to victor would be magnified by the public setting and the dramatic reversal of expectations, while the involvement of so many students in Brooklyn's scheme would ensure that the story of what happened spread throughout the school and the community with the speed and impact of wildfire. Maya's second call was to Marcus Thompson, the basketball player who had shown her kindness in the parking lot and who commanded enough respect among the student body to serve as a credible witness to whatever transpired at the dance. Maya didn't reveal the details of Brooklyn's plan, but she asked Marcus to pay attention to the evening's events and be prepared to provide an accurate account of what he observed to anyone who asked for his perspective afterward. Marcus agreed, clearly sensing that something significant was about to happen, even though Maya hadn't provided specifics. "Maya, I don't know what's going on between you and Brooklyn, but I want you to know that a lot of people at school have been uncomfortable with how you've been treated lately. If you need backup tomorrow night, you've got more friends than you might realize." Maya thanked him for the offer, but made it clear that she intended to handle the situation herself. What she didn't tell Marcus was that she was counting on the discomfort he had mentioned, on the fact that many students at Riverside High had been reluctant participants in Brooklyn's campaign, and would be relieved to see it end even if they hadn't been brave enough to oppose it themselves. Her final call was to her mother, who was working a late shift at the clinic but answered immediately when she saw Maya's name on her phone. "Is everything okay, sweetheart?" Dr. Chun asked, her voice carrying the kind of concern that came from months of watching her daughter navigate the complex social dynamics of a new school while processing grief and adjustment challenges. Maya assured her mother that she was fine, but asked for permission to attend the autumn harvest dance the following evening. Dr. Chun was surprised by the request, knowing that Maya had shown no interest in school social events and had seemed content to spend her weekend evenings training or studying. "I thought you weren't interested in school dances," Dr. Chen said carefully. "Has something changed? Have you made friends who want you to go with them?" Maya chose her words carefully, not wanting to lie to her mother, but also not wanting to worry her with details about the conflict that was about to reach its conclusion. "I've decided it's time to stop being invisible at school. Tomorrow night seems like a good opportunity to show people who I really am." Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment, and Maya could hear the subtle sounds of the medical clinic in the background, reminders of the important work her mother did every day to help people heal from various forms of trauma and injury. "Maya, I want you to promise me something," Dr. Chun said finally. "I want you to promise that whatever happens tomorrow night, you'll remember everything your father taught you about using your strength responsibly. He always said that the most powerful people are those who could hurt others, but choose to protect them instead." Maya promised, and as she ended the call, she reflected on the profound truth of her father's philosophy and how it would guide her actions in the hours ahead. Tomorrow night, she would have the opportunity to devastate Brooklyn Martinez and everyone who had participated in the campaign against her. She possessed the skills, the knowledge, and now the justification to inflict psychological and social damage that would follow them for years. But Maya also knew that her father's ghost would be watching, judging whether she used her capabilities to become the kind of person he had tried to raise her to be. The challenge wasn't just to defeat Brooklyn Martinez. The challenge was to do it in a way that honored the memory of a man who had taught her that true strength was always tempered by wisdom, compassion, and restraint. As Maya prepared for bed that night, she laid out the clothes she would wear to the dance: a simple black dress that she had borrowed from her mother, comfortable shoes that would allow her to move freely if movement became necessary, and minimal jewelry that wouldn't interfere with her mobility. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone who appeared to be dressing for a typical high school dance, but she knew that appearances could be deeply deceiving. Tomorrow night, Riverside High School would discover who Maya Chun really was beneath her quiet exterior and unassuming presence. Brooklyn Martinez would learn that some people couldn't be broken by teenage cruelty and social manipulation. And Maya herself would finally have the opportunity to honor her father's memory by becoming the kind of person he had always believed she could be: someone strong enough to protect herself and others, wise enough to choose her battles carefully, and brave enough to stand up for what was right even when standing alone. The autumn harvest dance was less than 24 hours away, and Maya Chun was ready for the final confrontation that would determine not just the outcome of her conflict with Brooklyn Martinez, but the kind of person she would choose to become in the crucible of that moment. Her father had taught her that character was revealed not in moments of comfort and safety, but in moments of pressure and challenge, when the stakes were high and the choices were hard. Tomorrow night, everyone at Riverside High would discover what Maya Chen was really made of, and Maya had a feeling that the revelation would surprise everyone, including herself. Part 5. The Reckoning, the evening of the autumn harvest. Dance arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the mountains around Cedar Valley look like they had been painted in shades of gold and crimson. Maya stood in front of her bedroom mirror, making final adjustments to her appearance, while her mind ran through the strategic considerations that would govern the next few hours. She looked like any other teenage girl preparing for a school dance, but beneath the surface, she was a weapon that had been carefully prepared and precisely targeted. Maya's black dress was simple but elegant, chosen specifically because it allowed her full range of motion while appearing completely appropriate for the occasion. Her hair was pulled back in a style that kept it out of her face, and she wore minimal makeup that wouldn't run or smudge if the evening became more physically demanding than most school dances. To any casual observer, she appeared to be a quiet student making an effort to participate in normal teenage social activities. What they couldn't see was the controlled power in her movements, the heightened awareness in her eyes, or the absolute certainty that tonight would end the conflict that had defined her first semester at Riverside High. Dr. Chun drove Maya to the school, chatting nervously about dance etiquette and social expectations, while casting concerned glances at her daughter's composed expression. Maya's mother had clearly sensed that tonight was significant in ways that went beyond typical teenage social milestones, but she had chosen to trust Maya's judgment rather than probe for details that might be difficult to hear. "Remember what your father always said about being strong enough to walk away from fights that don't matter," Dr. Chen said as they pulled into the school parking lot. "But also remember what he said about standing your ground when the fight does matter." Maya kissed her mother goodbye and walked toward the gymnasium, where the sounds of music and laughter indicated that Riverside High's autumn harvest dance was already in full swing. She paused at the entrance to observe the scene before her, noting the positions of key players in Brooklyn's scheme and beginning to track the social dynamics that would shape the evening's events. The gymnasium had been transformed into an autumn wonderland, with golden lights strung from the ceiling, hay bales arranged as informal seating areas, and a DJ booth decorated with pumpkins and maple leaves. Students moved through the space in small groups, their formal wear and excited energy creating the kind of atmosphere that made high school dances feel like magical events to the people participating in them. Maya spotted Brooklyn immediately, holding court near the center of the dance floor in a stunning red dress that made her look like a queen surveying her domain. Tessa and Riley flanked her as always, but Maya also noted the positions of other students who she recognized from Brooklyn's detailed plans as participants in the evening's orchestrated humiliation. They were scattered throughout the gymnasium, in seemingly casual arrangements that would allow them to converge quickly when Brooklyn gave the signal to begin. Maya made her way to the refreshment table, moving through the crowd with the same quiet composure that had characterized her behavior throughout the semester. She accepted congratulations from several classmates who seemed surprised but pleased to see her at the dance, and engaged in brief conversations that helped her gauge the mood of the room and identify potential allies among the students who had been uncomfortable with Brooklyn's campaign against her. Marcus Thompson appeared at her side within minutes of her arrival, looking sharp in a navy blue suit and carrying 2 cups of punch. "You came," he said, offering her one of the cups with a smile that suggested he was genuinely happy to see her there. "I have to admit, I wasn't sure you would show up after everything that's been happening lately." Maya accepted the punch and took a small sip, her eyes scanning the room while maintaining the appearance of casual conversation. "I decided it was time to stop letting other people's opinions determine what I do with my time. Besides, I've never been to a school dance before. It seemed like something I should experience at least once." Marcus followed her gaze across the room, noting the way certain students seemed to be watching Maya's every move with the kind of anticipation that suggested they were waiting for something specific to happen. "Maya, I don't want to alarm you, but I'm getting the feeling that tonight might not be as straightforward as a typical school dance," Marcus said carefully. "There's something in the air, like people are expecting some kind of entertainment that goes beyond dancing and socializing." Maya nodded, appreciating Marcus's intuition and his willingness to voice his concerns. You're very perceptive. There probably will be some unexpected entertainment tonight. When it happens, I want you to remember that things aren't always what they appear to be, and people aren't always who they seem to be. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, the DJ's voice boomed across the gymnasium, announcing that it was time for the evening's special recognition ceremony. Maya felt her pulse quicken slightly as she recognized the beginning of Brooklyn's elaborate trap, but her expression remained calm and interested as she turned toward the DJ booth with the same curiosity as everyone else in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced, we have a very special surprise tonight for one of our students who has shown exceptional courage and resilience this semester. Would Maya Chun please come to the center of the dance floor? A spotlight illuminated the center of the gymnasium as the crowd turned to look for Maya, their faces showing various degrees of surprise, curiosity, and anticipation. Maya could see Brooklyn's satisfied smile from across the room, could feel the convergence of the 30 students who had been positioned to participate in her public humiliation, could sense the phones being raised to record whatever was about to unfold. Maya handed her punch cup to Marcus and began walking toward the spotlight, her movements fluid and confident, despite the fact that she was walking directly into a trap that had been months in the making. The crowd parted before her, creating a clear path to the center of the dance floor where she would supposedly receive some kind of recognition that everyone in the room knew was actually the beginning of her destruction. As Maya reached the center of the spotlight, she turned to face the crowd with the same serene composure that had been her trademark throughout the semester. She could see Brooklyn moving into position near the DJ booth, could track the movements of Tessa and Riley as they prepared to execute their assigned roles, could sense the barely contained excitement of the students who thought they were about to witness the social execution of the quiet transfer student who had dared to challenge their queen. Maya Chun, the DJ continued, reading from a script that Maya knew had been carefully prepared by Brooklyn. You've been selected to receive our special Autumn Achievement Award for your outstanding contributions to school spirit and social harmony. The irony of the citation was lost on no one in the room, and Myung could hear scattered laughter from students who understood that they were witnessing the beginning of an elaborate joke at Maya's expense. But Maya simply smiled and nodded as if accepting the recognition at face value, playing her role in Brooklyn's script exactly as expected. We'd like to invite your secret admirer to join you on the dance floor, the DJ announced, to present you with this special recognition. This was the moment Maya had been waiting for, the point at which Brooklyn's trap would be fully revealed and Maya's real response could begin. A figure emerged from the crowd near the DJ booth, moving toward the spotlight with the kind of theatrical timing that suggested careful rehearsal. Maya recognized him as Tyler Morrison, a senior who was known for his involvement in the drama club and his willingness to participate in elaborate pranks for social media content. Tyler carried a bouquet of flowers and wore an expression of exaggerated romantic interest that was clearly designed to appear sincere to casual observers, while being obviously fake to anyone paying close attention. As he approached Maya in the center of the spotlight, phones throughout the gymnasium began recording, capturing what Brooklyn intended to be the first phase of Maya's humiliation. Maya, Tyler said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet gymnasium. I've been watching you all semester, admiring your intelligence and your strength from afar. I know this might seem sudden, but I was hoping you might dance with me tonight. Maya accepted the flowers with a gracious smile, playing her role perfectly while her mind calculated distances, positions, and timing for what was about to unfold. She could see Brooklyn's triumphant expression, could sense the barely controlled excitement of the crowd, could feel the weight of dozens of phones recording what they thought would be her moment of ultimate vulnerability. That's very sweet of you, Tyler, Maya said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the gymnasium. "I'd be happy to dance with you. But first, I think there's something the people in this room need to understand about what's really happening here tonight." Maya's tone remained conversational and friendly, but there was something in her words that made the crowd shift uncomfortably, sensing that the script they were expecting to follow was about to change in unexpected ways. "You see," Maya continued, still smiling at Tyler but addressing the entire room, "I know that Tyler isn't really my secret admirer. I know that Brooklyn Martinez orchestrated this entire evening as an elaborate trap designed to humiliate me in front of the whole school. I know about the 30 students who have been assigned specific roles in my public destruction, and I know about the social media campaign that's supposed to follow me to whatever school I transfer to after tonight." The gymnasium had gone completely silent now, with students freezing in place as they realized that Maya was somehow aware of the plan that was supposed to catch her completely off guard. Brooklyn's face had gone pale, and Maya could see panic beginning to replace the triumphant confidence that had characterized her expression just moments before. "But what Brooklyn doesn't know," Maya said, her voice taking on a quality that made even the students furthest from the spotlight lean forward to hear her clearly, "is that I've been ready for this moment since the day she decided to declare war on me. What she doesn't know is that quiet people aren't necessarily weak people, and that some of us have been trained by much more dangerous opponents than spoiled teenagers with too much time and too little character." Maya turned to face Brooklyn directly, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the kind of authority that made everyone in the room unconsciously straighten their posture. "Brooklyn, you've spent months trying to make me disappear, trying to convince everyone in this school that I'm weak and pathetic and deserving of whatever cruelty you could devise. You've recruited dozens of people to participate in campaigns of harassment and psychological manipulation, all because I accidentally spilled paint on your jacket and had the audacity to apologize for it instead of cowering in fear." Maya began, walking slowly toward Brooklyn, her movements controlled and predatory in a way that made several students instinctively step back to clear her path. "But tonight, in front of all these witnesses, I'm going to show you and everyone else in this room exactly who Maya Chun really is when she decides to stop being invisible." Maya reached into her purse and pulled out her phone, connecting it to the gymnasium's sound system with a confidence that suggested she had prepared for this moment with the same precision that characterized everything else about her. The large screens around the room flickered to life, displaying a presentation that Maya had prepared specifically for this confrontation. The first image that appeared was a photograph of David Chun in his Marine dress uniform, standing next to a display of military honors that included a silver star, 2 bronze stars, and a Purple Heart. The caption identified him as Gunnery Sergeant David Chun, United States Marine Corps, instructor at the Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, and recipient of multiple decorations for valor in combat. "This is my father," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly throughout the silent gymnasium. "He died 2 years ago, and Brooklyn thought it was appropriate to mock his death during our first confrontation. What Brooklyn didn't know is that before he died, my father spent 5 years teaching me everything he learned during his 3 combat tours and his decade as a hand-to-hand combat instructor for the United States Marines." The next slide showed Maya herself, but not the quiet, unassuming student that everyone at Riverside High knew. This was Maya in combat gear, executing advanced martial arts techniques with the precision and power that came from years of intensive training under expert instruction. The images showed her breaking boards, sparring with adult opponents, and demonstrating the kind of fighting skills that most people only saw in movies. The gymnasium erupted in whispers and gasps as students realized they had been completely wrong about the quiet transfer student they thought they knew. Maya let the images speak for themselves for a moment before continuing her presentation. "For 5 months, I've let people at this school treat me like I was weak, like I was vulnerable. Like I was someone who could be pushed around without consequences, Maya said. I made that choice because my father taught me that real strength comes from protecting people, not from hurting them. But he also taught me that sometimes, when people mistake kindness for weakness, you have to show them their mistake in a way they'll never forget. Maya advanced another slide, displaying the documents that Zoe had provided, showing Brooklyn's detailed plans for Maya's humiliation, along with evidence of the systematic harassment campaign that had been waged against her. Brooklyn Martinez and her followers have spent months planning this evening's entertainment, Maya said. They've recruited 30 students to participate in a coordinated attack designed to destroy my reputation and force me to leave this school. They've documented my family's personal information, stalked my movements, and plan to follow me to whatever school I might transfer to in order to continue their harassment campaign there. Maya could see several teachers and chaperones moving closer to the dance floor, clearly recognizing that what was happening had moved beyond typical teenage drama into territory that required adult intervention. But Maya wasn't finished yet. But what none of you understand, Maya said, her voice taking on the kind of quiet intensity that made everyone in the room hold their breath, is that I'm not the kind of person who runs away from bullies. I'm the kind of person who ends bullying campaigns so decisively that the bullies never want to try again. Maya moved to the center of the dance floor and assumed a fighting stance that instantly communicated years of professional training and discipline. Her transformation from quiet student to deadly warrior was so complete and so dramatic that several people in the crowd gasped audibly. "Brooklyn, you wanted to humiliate me in front of the entire school," Maya said. "Instead, you've given me the perfect opportunity to show everyone exactly what happens when someone tries to destroy a person who's been trained to fight back. You've made this personal, you've made it public, and now you're going to discover why my father spent so many years teaching me that the strongest people are the ones who could hurt you but choose not to, right up until you give them no other choice." Brooklyn tried to speak, to regain control of the situation that had completely escaped her management, but her voice came out as a weak croak that carried no authority in the face of Maya's controlled fury. Maya smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made everyone watching understand that they were about to witness something that would be talked about for years to come. "The good news, Brooklyn, is that I'm not going to hurt you," Maya said. "I'm not going to lay a finger on you or anyone else in this room, because that would make me the kind of person my father taught me never to become. But I am going to make sure that everyone here understands exactly what kind of person you are, and exactly what kind of person I am, so that nothing like this ever happens again." Maya gestured toward the screens around the room, which now displayed a comprehensive dossier on Brooklyn's harassment campaign, complete with screenshots, witness statements, and a detailed timeline of every cruel act that had been committed against Maya over the past months. "This is what Brooklyn Martinez calls leadership," Maya said. "This is what she calls strength. This is what she calls justified behavior toward someone who accidentally damaged her property and immediately offered to make it right. Everyone in this room can decide for themselves whether this is the kind of person they want to follow, the kind of behavior they want to support, the kind of legacy they want to be associated with." Maya paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room before delivering her final statement. But everyone in this room should also understand that Maya Chun is not the kind of person who can be broken by campaigns of cruelty and manipulation. I am not the kind of person who disappears when bullies want me to disappear. I am the daughter of a United States Marine who taught me to stand my ground against enemies much more dangerous than spoiled teenagers with too much time and too little character. And anyone who mistakes my kindness for weakness, my quietness for vulnerability, or my restraint for inability is going to learn a lesson they'll never forget. Maya looked around the room one final time, meeting the eyes of students who would never again see her as the invisible transfer student they could safely ignore or target for harassment. "The show's over," Maya said simply. Brooklyn's little game is finished. And now everyone gets to decide what kind of person they want to be in a school where they know that actions have consequences and bullies eventually meet people who can't be bullied. With that, Maya walked off the dance floor and toward the exit, leaving behind a gymnasium full of stunned students and a completely shattered Brooklyn Martinez who finally understood the difference between cruelty and strength. The silence that followed Maya's departure from the gymnasium was deafening, broken only by the sound of her footsteps echoing through the hallway as she walked away from the wreckage of Brooklyn's carefully constructed social empire. Behind her, 300 students stood frozen in place, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed and what it meant for the carefully ordered hierarchy that had governed their school for years. Brooklyn Martinez remained rooted to the spot where Maya's presentation had left her, her face a mask of shock and disbelief as she stared at the screens that still displayed the evidence of her months-long harassment campaign. The red dress that had made her look like a queen just minutes earlier now seemed to hang on her frame like a costume from a play that had ended badly, and the confident smile that had been her trademark throughout high school had been replaced by an expression of dawning horror as she realized the full scope of what had just happened to her reputation. Marcus Thompson was the first person to move, following Maya toward the exit with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he had made a decision about which side of history he wanted to be on. His movements seemed to break the spell that had held the crowd frozen, and within seconds the gymnasium erupted into a chaos of whispered conversations, heated arguments, and frantic social media activity as students began processing the implications of what they had witnessed. Tessa Rodriguez and Riley Park stood beside their fallen leader like guards at a fortress that had already been conquered, their faces showing the particular kind of devastation that comes from realizing you've been fighting on the wrong side of a war. The carefully coordinated plan that had seemed so clever and sophisticated just hours earlier now looked like the petty machinations of amateurs who had grossly underestimated their opponent and the 30 students who had been recruited to participate in Maya's humiliation were now facing the uncomfortable reality that they had just been publicly exposed as accomplices in a campaign of systematic cruelty. Maya walked through the school parking lot with the same controlled composure that had characterized her behavior throughout the evening, but internally she was experiencing a complex mixture of emotions that would take time to fully process. The confrontation she had been preparing for since the first day of Brooklyn's harassment campaign was finally over, and the victory had been more complete and more decisive than she had dared to hope. But she also felt the weight of what she had just revealed about herself, the knowledge that her carefully maintained invisibility was now permanently shattered, and that she would never again be able to move through the world as someone who could be safely ignored or underestimated. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother, who was waiting in the parking lot to pick her up as they had arranged. Dr. Chun's message was brief, but loaded with meaning. I saw students coming out early and they looked shaken. Are you okay? Do we need to talk? Maya replied that she was fine and would explain everything when she got to the car. But as she approached her mother's vehicle, she could see the concern and curiosity in Dr. Chun's expression through the windshield. Maya had successfully kept the details of Brooklyn's harassment campaign from her mother throughout the semester, not wanting to worry her with teenage drama that Maya felt capable of handling on her own. But tonight's confrontation had moved beyond the realm of typical high school conflict into territory that would require honest conversation between mother and daughter. How was the dance? Dr. Chun asked as Maya settled into the passenger seat, her tone carefully neutral but her eyes searching her daughter's face for clues about what had transpired in the gymnasium. Maya considered how much to reveal and how to frame the evening's events in a way that would help her mother understand without causing unnecessary alarm. It was educational, she said finally. I learned some important things about myself and about the people at my school. I think things are going to be different from now on." Dr. Chun studied her daughter's expression as they drove through the quiet streets of Cedar Valley, noting the subtle changes in Maya's posture and demeanor. That suggested something significant had shifted during the course of the evening. Maya looked older somehow, as if the girl who had left for the dance earlier that evening had been replaced by someone who had been tested and emerged stronger from the experience. Different how? Dr. Chun asked gently, recognizing that Maya needed space to process whatever had happened, but also wanting to ensure that her daughter knew she was available if guidance or support were needed. Maya turned to look out the window at the mountain silhouettes outlined against the star-filled sky, thinking about her father and the lessons he had taught her about courage, integrity, and the responsible use of power. "I think I've been hiding parts of myself because I was afraid of what would happen if people knew who I really was," she said. "Tonight I decided to stop hiding, and it turns out that being seen for who you really are is less scary than I thought it would be." Dr. Chun nodded, understanding that her daughter was talking about more than just teenage social dynamics, and recognizing the echo of conversations she had shared with David Chen about the challenges of transitioning from military to civilian life while maintaining the values and skills that had defined their service. "Your father always said that the hardest part of being strong was knowing when to show your strength and when to keep it hidden," she said. "It sounds like you made some important decisions about that balance tonight." Maya smiled, feeling a connection to her father's memory that was deeper and more meaningful than anything she had experienced since his death. "I think he would have been proud of how I handled things," she said. "I didn't hurt anyone, I didn't lose control, and I didn't let people mistake kindness for weakness. But I also didn't let anyone walk all over me or treat me like I was disposable." As they pulled into their driveway, Maya's phone began buzzing with notifications from social media platforms and text messaging apps, indicating that word of the evening's events was already spreading beyond the walls of Riverside High School. Maya glanced at the screen and saw dozens of messages from classmates, some offering support and admiration, others demanding details about what they had witnessed, and a few expressing shock or disbelief at the revelation of Maya's combat training and family background. The most interesting messages came from students Maya had never spoken to before, people who had apparently been watching Brooklyn's harassment campaign with growing discomfort, but hadn't known how to intervene or voice their disapproval. These students were now reaching out to express their admiration for Maya's courage and their relief that someone had finally stood up to the toxic social dynamics that had been allowed to flourish unchecked at their school. Maya decided to turn off her phone for the evening, recognizing that she needed time to process what had happened before engaging with the social aftermath of her confrontation with Brooklyn. She suspected that Monday morning would bring new challenges and new dynamics to navigate, but she also felt confident that she was prepared for whatever came next. The weekend that followed the autumn harvest dance passed in a blur of phone calls, text messages, and unexpected visitors as word of Maya's revelation spread throughout Cedar Valley's tight-knit community. Dr. Chun found herself fielding calls from other parents who wanted to understand what had happened at the dance and what it meant for their own children's experiences at Riverside High School. Many of these parents expressed gratitude that someone had finally exposed the systematic bullying that their children had been reluctant to discuss, while others seemed concerned about the implications of having a student with extensive martial arts training in their school. Maya spent Saturday morning in her garage, working through an extended training routine that helped her process the emotional intensity of the previous evening, while reconnecting with the physical discipline that had always been her anchor during times of stress or uncertainty. As she moved through the combinations that her father had taught her, she felt his presence more strongly than she had since his death, as if her decision to honor his memory by standing up for herself had somehow brought them closer together. Across the divide between life and death, Sergeant Santos called that afternoon to check on Maya and offer her perspective on how the confrontation had been handled. Maya provided a detailed debrief of the evening's events, explaining how Brooklyn's trap had been turned against her, and how the revelation of Maya's training had shifted the power dynamics at Riverside High School without requiring any actual violence or physical confrontation. "Your father would have been incredibly proud," Sergeant Santos said when Maya finished her account. "You used superior intelligence, strategic thinking, and psychological warfare to defeat an opponent who had every advantage except the one that mattered most: character. You turned their strengths against them and exposed their weaknesses without compromising your own integrity or crossing any lines that you'd regret later." Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction at this assessment, knowing that Sergeant Santos had the experience and perspective to evaluate her actions according to the standards that her father would have applied. The confrontation with Brooklyn had been about more than just stopping a harassment campaign. It had been about proving to herself that she could honor her father's memory while defending herself against people who tried to exploit what they perceived as weakness or vulnerability. Sunday brought an unexpected visitor in the form of Principal Williams, who appeared at the Chun family's front door with an expression that suggested he was dealing with a situation that had moved well beyond typical teenage drama into territory that required administrative attention. Dr. Chun invited him in for coffee, and Maya joined them in the living room for a conversation that would help determine how the school would respond to the events at the dance. "Maya, I want you to know that what happened Friday night has created quite a stir in our community," Principal Williams began, his tone carefully professional, but tinged with the kind of concern that suggested he was still trying to understand the full implications of what had transpired. "I've received calls from parents, school board members, and even some community leaders who want to understand how we ended up with a situation where one student felt the need to publicly expose another student's harassment campaign in such a dramatic fashion." Maya listened carefully, recognizing that her confrontation with Brooklyn had created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate participants and into the broader community that surrounded Riverside High School. She had anticipated some form of administrative response, but she had hoped that the evidence she had presented would speak for itself and make it clear that she had been defending herself rather than initiating conflict. "I want to be clear that I'm not here to discipline you or suggest that you did anything wrong," Principal Williams continued. "The evidence you presented Friday night makes it obvious that you were the target of a systematic harassment campaign that should have been brought to my attention much earlier. What I'm trying to understand is how we can move forward in a way that ensures this kind of situation doesn't happen again." Maya appreciated the principal's approach and his willingness to focus on systemic solutions rather than treating the incident as an isolated disciplinary issue. "What I'd like people to understand," she said, "is that I spent months trying to handle the situation quietly and avoid escalating it into something that would require adult intervention. I only chose to make it public when it became clear that Brooklyn was planning something that would have caused serious and lasting damage to my reputation and my future opportunities." Principal Williams nodded, consulting notes that suggested he had spent considerable time investigating the background of Friday night's confrontation. "We've been reviewing security footage, interviewing witnesses, and examining the evidence you presented, and it's clear that Miss Martinez and her associates engaged in behavior that violated multiple school policies regarding harassment, cyberbullying, and creating a hostile educational environment. They will face appropriate consequences for their actions." Maya felt relieved that the school administration was taking the harassment seriously and holding Brooklyn accountable for her behavior, but she was more interested in ensuring that the broader lessons of the confrontation were not lost in the focus on individual punishment. "What I hope people take away from this," Maya said, "is that quiet students aren't necessarily weak students, and that kindness shouldn't be mistaken for vulnerability. I also hope that students who witness harassment campaigns will feel more empowered to speak up instead of waiting for the situation to reach a crisis point." Principal Williams agreed that the incident had highlighted the need for better systems to identify and address harassment before it escalated to the level that had been reached in Maya's case. He outlined plans for enhanced training for faculty and staff, improved reporting mechanisms for students who witnessed or experienced harassment, and a comprehensive review of the social dynamics that had allowed Brooklyn's campaign to continue unchecked for so long. Monday morning brought Maya back to Riverside High School for the first time since her dramatic revelation at the dance, and she was not surprised to discover that her status in the school's social ecosystem had undergone a complete transformation. Students who had previously ignored her now watched her with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and caution, while others approached her with genuine admiration for her courage in standing up to Brooklyn's harassment campaign. The most significant change was in the behavior of students who had been reluctant participants in Brooklyn's schemes, many of whom sought out Maya to apologize for their involvement and express their relief that the toxic dynamic had finally been exposed and ended. These conversations were often emotional and cathartic, as students revealed the pressure they had felt to conform to Brooklyn's expectations and their discomfort with the cruelty they had been asked to participate in. Maya accepted these apologies with grace while also making it clear that true redemption would require them to actively work to prevent similar situations from developing in the future. She emphasized that bystanders had the power to stop harassment campaigns by refusing to participate and by supporting targets instead of joining their tormentors. Zoe Williams was among the first to approach Maya, her face showing a mixture of shame and gratitude as she struggled to find words to express her feelings about her role in the events leading up to the dance. "I don't know how to apologize for what I did," Zoe said, tears streaming down her face. "I knew it was wrong, but I was so scared of what would happen to me if I didn't go along with Brooklyn's plan. I should have been braver. I should have stood up for you sooner. I should have been the kind of friend you deserved." Maya embraced her former friend, recognizing the genuine remorse in Zoe's words and the courage it had taken for her to provide the intelligence that had allowed Maya to prepare for Brooklyn's trap. "You did stand up for me when it mattered most," Maya said. "Without the information you gave me, Friday night could have gone very differently. That took real courage, and it's the reason I was able to turn their plan against them." The reunion between Maya and Zoe attracted the attention of other students who had been watching to see how Maya would respond to the people who had participated in her harassment. Maya's willingness to forgive and her emphasis on learning from mistakes rather than seeking revenge sent a powerful message about the kind of person she was and the kind of community she wanted to help build at Riverside High School. Brooklyn Martinez's response to her downfall was perhaps the most interesting aspect of the aftermath, as she seemed to oscillate between denial, anger, and something that might have been genuine reflection on her behavior and its consequences. The social media empire she had built around her image as the unchallenged queen of Riverside High School collapsed almost overnight, as former followers distanced themselves from her and the evidence of her harassment campaign continued to circulate throughout the community. Maya encountered Brooklyn for the first time since the dance in the hallway outside their shared history class, and the exchange that followed would be remembered by witnesses as a defining moment in both of their high school careers. Brooklyn approached with the obvious intention of confronting Maya, but her usual confidence had been replaced by a desperate need to salvage some remnant of her former status. "I hope you're happy," Brooklyn said, her voice lacking the authority that had once made students step aside when she walked through the hallways. "You've destroyed everything I worked for, turned the entire school against me, and made me look like some kind of monster. Was it worth it? Was your revenge really worth ruining my life?" Maya stopped and turned to face Brooklyn, and when she spoke, her voice carried the kind of calm authority that came from someone who had been tested and emerged stronger from the experience. "Brooklyn, I didn't destroy your life," Maya said. "I simply showed people who you really were when you thought there would be no consequences for your actions. Everything that happened to you was the result of choices you made, behavior you engaged in, and values you demonstrated. I didn't ruin your reputation. I revealed it." Brooklyn's face flushed with anger and embarrassment, but she seemed unable to formulate a response that would allow her to reclaim control of the narrative or shift blame away from her own actions. "But I want you to understand something," Maya continued, her tone becoming gentler but no less firm. "This doesn't have to be the end of your story. You can choose to learn from this experience, to grow as a person, to become someone who uses their influence to build others up instead of tearing them down. The question is whether you're strong enough to admit your mistakes and do the hard work of becoming a better person." Maya walked away, leaving Brooklyn standing in the hallway, with the opportunity to choose how she would respond to the consequences of her actions and what kind of person she would become in the aftermath of her fall from power. The weeks that followed saw a gradual but significant shift in the culture at Riverside High School, as students began to recognize that the social dynamics they had accepted as normal were actually choices that could be changed through individual and collective action. Maya found herself in the unexpected position of being an informal leader in this transformation, not because she sought power or influence, but because her example had shown others that it was possible to stand up to bullying and create positive change. Maya started an informal support group for students who had experienced harassment or bullying, providing a safe space for them to share their experiences and develop strategies for protecting themselves and others. The group grew quickly, attracting not just victims of bullying but also students who wanted to learn how to be more effective allies and bystanders. The group's meetings often included discussions about conflict resolution, personal safety, and the psychology of harassment, drawing on Maya's unique combination of combat training and lived experience to provide practical guidance that was grounded in both theory and reality. Maya was careful to emphasize that physical self-defense was just one tool among many for dealing with harassment, and that the most effective responses usually involved intelligence, strategy, and community support rather than violence. Marcus Thompson became one of Maya's closest allies in this effort, using his status as a popular athlete to encourage other influential students to take active roles in creating a more inclusive and supportive school environment. His public support for Maya and her message helped legitimize the cultural changes that were taking place and made it socially acceptable for other students to speak out against harassment and bullying. The transformation was not immediate or complete, and there were still incidents of cruelty and exclusion that required intervention and correction. But the overall climate at Riverside High School had shifted in fundamental ways, with students showing greater awareness of how their actions affected others and greater willingness to intervene when they witnessed harmful behavior. Maya's academic performance continued to excel throughout this period, as she channeled the energy and focus that had once gone into managing harassment into her studies and extracurricular activities. She joined the debate team, where her analytical skills and calm demeanor under pressure made her a formidable competitor, and she volunteered as a tutor for younger students who were struggling with the transition to high school. Teachers and administrators noticed the positive changes in Maya's engagement and confidence, and several approached her about leadership opportunities and academic competitions that would allow her to represent Riverside High School in regional and state-level events. Maya accepted these opportunities selectively, choosing activities that aligned with her interests and values, while being careful not to overcommit herself or lose sight of the balance that was essential to her well-being. As the semester drew to a close, Maya reflected on the transformation that had taken place in her life and in her school since that autumn evening when she had finally decided to stop being invisible. The quiet transfer student who had arrived at Riverside High School, hoping to blend into the background, had become a recognized leader and advocate, not because she had sought that role, but because circumstances had required her to step forward. and demonstrate the courage and integrity that her father had tried to instill in her. The final validation of Maya's approach came during the spring semester, when Brooklyn Martinez approached her privately to apologize for her behavior and ask for guidance on how to repair the damage she had caused to her relationships and reputation. The conversation was difficult and emotional, but it represented a genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a commitment to personal growth that gave Maya hope for Brooklyn's future. Maya accepted the apology and offered to help Brooklyn develop strategies for making amends to the people she had hurt. But she also made it clear that redemption would require sustained effort and genuine change rather than quick fixes or superficial gestures. The process would be long and challenging, but Maya believed that people could change if they were willing to do the necessary work. As Maya prepared for her senior year at Riverside High School, she looked forward to the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead with a confidence that had been earned through trial and tested under pressure. She knew that her father's lessons about courage, integrity, and the responsible use of power would continue to guide her as she navigated the complexities of leadership and the responsibilities that came with being someone others looked to for guidance and inspiration. The shy, invisible girl who had once walked through the hallways of Riverside High School like a ghost had discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is step into the light and show the world exactly who you are, especially when who you are is someone strong enough to protect others and brave enough to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.